Hello, all. Very sorry that we're running a few minutes late. We appreciate your understanding. Um, so, I was just hearing from Ben over here that he was at. The reason we're doing this today and not yesterday is because Ben was supporting his wife in her PhD defense.
Yeah,
Correct?
assisting would be overstatement, but yeah, providing
Uh,
emotional support.
okay, so what's her next stage?
Next stage is like a postdoc fellowship, so that like a 2-year fellowship. So that's part of the program. But at that point, she's a doctor. So that's kind of like the big milestone.
We're very proud of her.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
I'm going to add a link if anyone wants to join our class, respectfully, of course. And later on, we could have more of a chit chat sort of conversation. All right, I would say let's rock and roll.
Yeah, let's hit it. I think we were at 13. So yeah, we talked about Aaron and how you can be the 12th. Now, being a student of Aaron, how that is about pursuing peace.
Correct. We had and we had Hillel talking, and Hillel, which should be continue speaking now as well.
Yep.
Beseder. So let's take it away. הוא היה אומר, נגד שמה, אבד שמה, ודלא מוסיף, יסף, ודלא יליף, קטלה, חייב, ודהשתמש בתגה, חלף. Okay, so we know Hillel speak. Well, let me do a translation over here. He also used to say, he being our boy Hillel, one who makes his name great causes his name to be destroyed. One who does not add to his knowledge causes it to cease. One who does not study the Torah deserves death. One who makes unworthy use of the crown, here they tell us of learning, shall pass away. All right. Now, one of the first questions we would ask over here is, why are we speaking Aramaic?
That is a very great question, because right? It's very hard.
Suddenly we get told over here, like, whoa, what is this language over here? Now, some of these words are similar to Hebrew. Mosif, katla, chayav, deishtamesh is lihishtamesh, to use, but obviously there's other words over here that are less familiar. And I would start with, we need to go back again, as we do, in the context of where is Hillel? Who's this dude? So Hillel is Hillel Habavli. He comes from Babylon. And however, we're also told that he studied under Shmaya and Avtalyon. We discussed that story last time, and that is happening in Israel. So the story is that Hillel was, in fact, in Israel studying. He then leaves Israel, descends, and goes to Babylon, where he studies, and then he comes back later on back to Israel. However, we're seeing a little snippet right now of this is Hillel talking when he's in Babylon. I see that the clown of Babylon is saying, I'm also from Babylon. We're actually basically the same. Correct. I think Hillel's life is loosely based on your life, really. Okay, so there's also, we see over here, just as far as Hillel goes, and we're going to also see this in the conversation we're having over here as far as what he's saying, which is there's 3 stages, which is Lomed, Talmid, Melamed. Okay, which in English would be student, learner, teacher. And when he is in Shmaya and Avtalyon, in the beginning, he is a student. When he's in Babylon, he is he's a student. When he's in Babylon, he is learning. He's already at a more advanced stage where he's doing his solo learning. And when he comes back, he's already the teacher. And this should come to a head when we start getting into this, because we say over here, he who makes his name great causes his name to be destroyed. So what does that mean? There are interpretations that say if you gain 15 minutes of fame, right, you're pushing your name out there, you're trying to publicize yourself or promote yourself. Ultimately, things go downhill from there.
Right, it's risky.
I'm sorry?
It's risky when you're visible.
I mean, even if you become uber famous, ultimately down the line, you see like people have to constantly reinvent themselves, right? Like you're next thing you know, you're on Dancing on the Stars. I think that's when you know like you're already at the bottom. But you know, people are trying, and in today's day and age, we've created more and more platforms which allow people to sort of still stay sort of within the limelight, but it's so saturated already, and there's old school Hollywood people that eventually sort of, you know, they fizzled out into nothing. Also, that's very much the nature of things, because you usually, if you're just trying to promote nothing or trying to have like it's a fleeting fad, there's no real substance underneath, so it can't really sustain itself. However, there are clearly you know, Michael Jackson was famous for a very long time, but that's because the guy walked the walk, it being the moonwalk, and actually talked the talk. He was a fantastic singer, right? So that kept on producing, and you kept on, thank you. And there was real substance over there, so that's something that could last. However, generally speaking, if you're just trying to promote your own name for your own fame, it's not going to last long. Now, back to what we were saying about Hillel, there are some that interpret this specifically in also the Aramaic as Hillel speaking to himself. And this also helps us clarify the timeline a little, because, you know, last second we were talking about how we know Hillel's the Nasi. He's speaking to everyone. He's telling everyone these decrees, right? So are you not like promoting your name? And we're being told that when he was in Babylon, already making a name for himself, or he was already known. He's trying to tell himself, you know, check yourself, know your place, and don't jump ahead yet, because if you're going to like Icarus fly to the sun too quickly, your wings are going to end up melting. So he needs to pace himself. There is something also here when we were saying you end up destroying your name, because while you may gain something by gaining fame, you are losing something in yourself, which is privacy. The second you do that, there's already a loss that you're already giving up of yourself, which is like you're giving yourself up to the people, so to speak, and you're now giving up that anonymity of yourself, which is also a loss.
Right. Isn't that kind of like there's this idea of like the audience capture? So it's not only that you're losing the privacy, it's also that the space outside of you is starting to affect, like, so the boundaries between you and the
you lose yourself.
Yeah. So the name doesn't capture you anymore, because
I like that. Audience capture would be a good example of, like, again, where that could be very problematic for you. From our previous classes, we were talking about how you should lisnot et rabbanut, which we interpreted not as the rabbinate, but more as, let's say, the government or the authorities. So here too, this is potentially a hint to that as well, which is if you stick your neck out too much, you're going to be noted by the authorities, which could lead to your destruction, basically. And that has to do with obviously the tense times with the Jews under the rule of other authorities. So you got to be very wary of that as well if you want to, again, fly too close to the sun, so to speak. Yeah. Now, there is also interpretation, which is Shema Avad Shmei, which is the Shema over here. The name over here is the Tetragrammaton, and which is don't be using God's name in vain. Jacob talks a lot about how, like, he doesn't even write the name G-O-D, rather he writes G-D. And there's a very deep understanding there of, and also this is what it means, like, Avad Shemei, you get destroyed, because if you really think that you could use God's name, his true name, which we, in this context at least, of Pirkei Avot for sure in Judaism, which we believe that name is supposed to be the ideal name of God, right? Which is supposed to be manifest in the ideal world. Then, and we know right now is not the ideal world. You're basically claiming, no, now is the ideal world, and this is it. And because of that, I could say his name. And we are told that whoever uses God's name in vain is also lo zoche le'olam haba. And that's because seemingly you've already, so to speak, created the world to come already now by saying God's name and thinking for yourself that, like, this is the ideal world. Then you're sort of cutting yourself out of that real ideal world one day because you were too quick to assume that was happening right now. So obviously some could say not writing GOD is maybe a little too intense, but I totally understand the sentiment of wanting to be very wary with jotting down something that is supposed to be like the ideal reality.
Right.
So kudos to you, Jacob, on that end. Okay, so now we'll move on to Udelo Mosif Yosef, one who does not add to his knowledge, causes it to cease, right? So this is very much, if we're not contributing, then we'll basically perish, like we're seeing over here. You're welcome, Jacob. And there needs to be there's a sense where you want to reach completion. However, Rabbi Cook has an idea, which is shlemut v'hishtalmut, so completion and progression. And there's a debate, whether the progression is really allowing you to achieve completion because, like, there's motion to it and it's alive, or is completion, which is like a fixed point, but then it's fixed and it's no longer moving. And Rabbi Cook famously says there needs to be a synthesis of both of those. There's both of those at the same time. There has to be yes, we want to reach a level of completion, which is seemingly fixed. However, there's always part of that engine that's moving towards progressing, towards creating a deeper and renewed sense of things. So this goes back to Dulo Mosif Yosef, right? So whoever is not contributing and not adding more is really is creating like like he's creating himself like a stagnant reality, and it ultimately creates like a lower quality of life as well. And this has to do more of like a sociological statement, which could relate to let's say the UBI conversation that Andrew Yang was having at the time. And the question, and also with AI, and the question is like, if we could really achieve this place where, like, my food is being printed in my house and it's all the healthiest food, and I have all this idle time right now, so to speak, do I lose a sense of meaning? It's a problem. You really want to be able to have a sense that you're doing something, that you're constantly advancing, and it's not only is it good enough for you to keep mowing your lawn, so to speak, but ideally gain more space, create a bigger garden, do more.
So you're saying Mosif, like progressing in terms of you need to not necessarily push the challenge to other technologies making, or like doing something better, but it's like you need to accept the challenge and do it better.
You need to accept the challenges to do it better. I mean, this is obviously, we're speaking to everyone, but this is saying now there's always the context of this happening. Like, we could be saying this about life, and we could also be saying this specifically about Torah, right? So am I always do more in life and be advancing more? Also, when you are studying Torah and learning Torah, it's not enough for you just to do just to keep on repeating the same thing over and over and over again. While there's a place for repetition and working out your memorization skills. However, you want to be advancing, and more than just advancing, you want to be contributing yourself. You want to be part of that living tree that is also that is being an active participant of your community, your Torah learning, your surroundings.
Right, not just receiving the fruits of
correct, not just receiving.
Yeah.
Just again, as far as the learning, there's also sort of a challenge to you, which is don't just accept what your rabbi is teaching as in like, and that's where it ended. Rather, push further. See if you could understand deeper. See if you could understand more. Like you're not supposed to just assume that's because he said X, Y, Z. And that's really the transition from the learner to the teacher, where you now have to send get to that position where you yourself could be teaching and potentially be teaching new things as well. Rabbi Nachman has a famous saying, which is, don't be old, lo liot zaken, and not physically old, but rather mentally, don't be stuck in your ways.
Right.
You must be young. You must be youthful and have the mindset of exploring new ideas.
And so it was Rabbi Nachman using Bob Dylan's words, or was Bob Dylan using Rabbi Nachman's words?
No one knows. It's still up to debate.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I can imagine like Rabbi Nachman having sort of like a Bob Dylan voice, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not being beautiful, but being very like authentic, rich. Yeah. By the way, specifically about like Rabbi Nachman, and Zevi talks about this, Zevi Slavin in his Seekers of Unity video with Malila, but how she expresses to him how the reason she loves Kabbalah and saying as in that she accepts is because she sees it as something that she is able to play with. And she uses an example of Rabbi Nachman of, because of how poetic he was, he felt very free to sort of take the Hasidic tradition he had and the Kabbalistic tradition he had and really try to create this whole new thing out of it, because he felt that need of lehosif.
Yeah, I think this will connect. We'll probably talk about this more because in a few verses of Mishnayot, there's something about learning and doing that Shammai talks about. So I can see that also, because that would be my next question to you in terms of like, you learn, you become a teacher. You don't only become a teacher, you also procedurally, or like you learn something and then you do it, and that is might be one of the purposes of learning, right? So yeah,
I mean, again, that's why it's called the Talmid Chacham, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rabbis today, we use the term rabbi, but generally speaking, it's Talmid Chacham. It's wise student. Even if you're at the highest the highest point of the hierarchy, you are the wisest of students, because you're always going back to the fact that you are constantly learning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we have Udelo Yalif Katla Chayav. One who does not study the Torah deserves death. Right? Really, really intense stuff going on over here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one is his, ignorance will ultimately lead him to sin, right? Someone that is not advancing, someone that is not studying at all. This goes back to sort of like the Rousseauian idea of like them finding like some tribe, and they were naturally had like this amazing sense of morality, but in practice, what we see on the ground is that if people don't have a certain structure and are not advancing, they end up really shrinking morally and becoming potentially even like a hazard to society. So there's a sense over here which is not only like he should be killed, but like that they're gonna send out a decree to off with your head. Rather, society will end up getting rid of you, because you will end up becoming like a danger to society, whether it's because you don't know how to drive, you never learn to be safe, you're being reckless. Like all those things are happening from the lack of studying, from the lack of being aware of your surroundings and engaging in the world on that level. So there's a clear message over here again of like, not being idle. There's also a sense of you're like really left empty. It's like I said, like it's not worth keeping you around as far as like society is concerned. I would mention, and this is obviously politically relevant right now, but before I say that one, there's also some that interpret this, which is it really, if you are not teaching not really studying, but as if you're not advancing, because this is part of the conversation already where we're saying, obviously you're studying, rather, are you going to get to the place where you are now teaching out of when we were talking about Lo Yosef, right? You're not adding to your knowledge. Adding to your knowledge is through teaching. So again, it's saying maybe like this is also referring to that.
Yeah.
But to what I was saying politically, that in Israel right now, part of the tensions are that the Haredi / ultra Orthodox communities are very resistant to the current desire of the majority of the secular population, or a big population in Israel, to change the status quo with regards to their serving in the military, which is mandatory in Israel. And they have an exemption. And a lot of this also could depend on the clause of reasonableness, and if this is being changed by the courts. So the reason I mention this is because when you read a line like this, you realize that the Torah is telling you here that it's, yes, you have to keep the commandments and you have to act in a righteous way. All that's true. However, you also must study the Torah. In the act of studying, it's just as important. It's also accepting on like the yoke of heaven, which is the actual practice, not the actual practice, the actual the actual function of just learning the Torah constantly. And if you don't do so, we're telling over here, you should be killed. You should be put to death. So you could imagine how people that this is very much their context, and maybe not their fault, but learning this under specific interpretations that are even more extreme.
Yeah,
you can have a real sense what you're saying. Like, I don't understand. Like, why can't they stop learning? They'll be like, buddy, what are you talking about? Like, this is as real as it gets. Like, this is do or die. So I was talking about this with one of my clients, which is, I don't think people don't take seriously enough the fact that you have this population, specifically the Haredi population, that sees it that intensely. And of course, that's part of the context of, that's why we're in Israel. That's why we're here. That's why it's called Israel. So, like, if at some point, if you're not buying into that narrative, then you are definitely occupying, because like you shouldn't be there. And if you're not buying into that narrative, which is like, this is my homeland, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is where I'm like, and part of like a larger mission, which also includes traditionally the learning, the actual act of learning of Torah, then obviously we could see why we're in a very
yeah. I mean,
we don't have to get necessarily into
we don't have to get into it, yeah, but I think this shows kind of like the difference between how secular Jews in Israel, and I would include myself in them just because that was how I grew up, see it differently from how different it got to be from how the religious Jews view their own narrative, and in how important Torah is in that. So yeah, I mean, you say this is so fundamental to Jews, but you have other Jews that view the history is like so separate from that. The history is so separate from this idea of how of the Torah and how close it is continuously, that it's like the two people are not aware of each other's, or maybe the two people are not aware of each other's axioms, like, to begin with.
I would say, and then we'll put this conversation to bed or discuss it
later on. Yeah,
later on. But in the earlier generations of the state of Israel, even the secular, and we'll take an example of Ben Gurion, who was very secular. He very much was connected to the Bible, to the history, to the story, so much so that he sends out an army special elite unit to go and get from a different country scrolls, some of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were taken. He wanted to bring them back, right? Could you imagine, like, if we discuss reason, like, the reasonable clause today in Israel democracy, like, is it reasonable to send soldiers to a different country to maybe have war? And his attitude was 100% yes. This is part of our story. Those texts are ours. He would take different army generals and have them, part of their service was to write books and reports about different biblical battles in Jewish history. So that was, you don't really have that today anymore. They diluted the amount of Talmud and Tanakh that is being Bible that is taught in schools. So I think that obviously creates a bigger divide. Of course,
we've awoken. Yeah,
of course.
I have one rule on my channel.
Yeah. We're on the Resident channel
no unadulterated veneration of idols, whether that's the Trinity or Zionism.
Who's the idol over here?
Zionism.
No, excuse me. I wasn't promoting Zionism. All I was saying that it was very important for the older generation to be connected to their roots. That's it.
Yeah, Ben Gurion, definitely.
I don't know. You tell me, what is it called when you send your army, your soldiers, to a different country to bring back scrolls?
I don't want to describe it. I don't want to discuss it.
Okay. Now we're not discussing it. Maybe it's a fable.
Yeah. Okay.
Jacob, we're sorry that we mentioned Zionism. I'm not really speaking from Israel. This isn't really happening.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's move on. One who makes unworthy use of the crown of learning shall pass away as well. We say this as well. So first of all, taga in Aramaic also means crown, but like, I don't know if it also comes like where we have like tag comes from. Like the word tag, like sort of to tag something is maybe in a way it's like to crown something. You also have that like in that Rabbi Akiva would interpret the tagim of the letters as well. Like any the way the like the shin or the Hebrew letters are written, some of them have like these little crowns on top. He would have interpretations to those things as well. But that's just more of like a linguistic point. Okay, so one using the Torah crown, so big or small, whether you are a very learned man or a Jewish child, either way, you have some sort of crown by the fact that you are learning and engaging in the Torah.
Yeah,
and the Torah wants it to be clear that once you did all this learning that we said you have to do, and once we said that like you have to be contributing, right? So we're not saying just be a student. We're also saying also be a teacher, right? Be innovative. Make a TEDx, open up a YouTube channel, make a podcast. Do. At the same time, you got to slow your roll. You can't be utilizing your Torah to get ahead in life. You can't be utilizing your Torah crown to create this big name for yourself. You can't be using your Torah crown to advance yourself to make more money. Now you'd be like, well, one second. What is a teacher doing? So the idea would be like the teacher is sought after from the students being, you teach us because we recognize that in you. Not, hey, look at me. I'm a great teacher. You guys want to take me on. Or using the Torah for yourself, which is like, I'm just going to take these concepts and I'm going to allow them to manipulate my environment from my understanding of this Torah, which is not being subservient to the Torah, rather making the Torah bend to your needs. So the Torah is obviously very against that concept as well.
It sort of kind of reminds me of the story, I think it's a midrash about in the desert where there's a plague among the Israelites, and Moses sends Aaron to stop the angel of death. And Aaron talks to the angel of death, and he tells him, like, and Aaron tells him to stop, and the angel of death tells him, God sent me here, so what, like, who is your messenger? And he tells Moses. And so the angel tells him, who do you think is better? And Aaron tells him, like, if you think Moses speaks for himself, you're mistaken, because it's all what he speaks is really what God is God's will, right? So in this kind of
Elohim medaber metoch grono.
There you go. So this kind of reminds me of like this crown is not something that Moses takes for himself. I mean, it's like explicitly something that is like you can see this is something that comes from beyond myself. It's not something that is mine. So that kind of reminded me of that.
Just commenting a little comment over here that I see. Can you live without the Torah? I can live without the Bible. Was the Torah made for wrongdoers like the Bible? I don't think. I mean, when you're saying the Bible, you'd have to differentiate between new and old. And then, no, I don't think it's made for wrongdoers. Rather, it's a fantastic iOS system and the living word of God. Okay. Thank you for that, though. Let's move on to the next Mishnah.
Let's do it.
All right, take us there, sir.
Let's see if I can make it. Yep.
Right. Actually, before I jump in there, let's just see if there's anything, any other lines over here. You have, I think you have what's up, congratulations. I'm assuming that's to do with your wife. So that's very nice. And go to letters, go down and there, confound their language. They may not understand. Okay, that has to do with Babylon, with the Tower of Babel. Sorry, therefore I speak to them in parable because they see it not, and hearing they hear not, neither do understand. Okay, we appreciate that immensely, sir. Thank you. Mishnah 14. Hu haya omer. So we're going back to we were talking previously, and it's our boy Hillel. He's still in town, and he's talking. And he says, and this actually relates to Moshe speaking with Torah Grana, so hopefully this will dovetail nicely. Im ein anili mili, which is a very famous phrase. I'm sure you've heard that. Ukshani latzmi mani v'im lo achshav e matai. He also used to say, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? But if I am for my own self only, what am I? And if not now, when? All right. So first, it starts with this heavy hitter line over here, which is, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? You are the only one responsible for yourself, both physically and spiritually. You will not be able to sustain yourself from other people's food, as in like when they eat, it doesn't sustain you. And what they learn won't sustain you either. You must fend for yourself. Okay. It's just letting you know facts on the ground. Like you have to take care of this. Now, there's a sense, there's like a deeper also sense over here where Hillel is hinting and speaking to the concept of nullifying oneself, or sort of what we see in Buddhism of like getting rid of the me, right? I completely dissolve myself. The spirit lives on, but there's no me. However, the Torah comes and says, "V'bacharta b'chaim." Even crazier in the Bible we have when during the Ten Commandments, God says, "V'yedaber Elohim et ha'adam v'chai," and He tells them, "V'lo lamut." Like you could experience me, the Almighty, and you don't have to die. You don't have to nullify yourself. You don't have to disappear completely. And this is again, like this is a real challenge to like what we see from like some of these Eastern traditions with that idea. And there's a sense the Bible, the Talmud says, "Bnei Israel baishanim hem," like we're like very embarrassed, we're very shy. And there's a problem about being shy, which is like, do I really recognize myself? Am I allowing myself really to be me? Like other countries, I don't think ask themselves, do they have a right of self-determination? However, Israel is constantly asking itself, do we have the right to be self-determined? Who are we? Will people recognize us? So like, there's still a very sense which we don't know who we are. And that is in a certain way, a challenge to God. And you also, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that this reminds me just of the point you made, about kind of the trade-off of like a nullification, but also asserting yourself or being yourself, is kind of related to this what we talked about, studying and being a teacher. So you can be somebody that's studying, taking this all in, but there is a trade-off here where you are also somebody that expresses some kind of perspective, or is a creator themselves, right? Creating things in the world. So that seems to me the same dichotomy, or the kind of the same struggle here.
So this is a good place to bring in when we were saying that Moses is speaking, that God is speaking through Moses' mouth. So there's a sense, some sages interpret this by saying he managed to completely empty himself of Moses, where there was room now for God to speak. Sort of like there's no room for Moses even to stand inside the tabernacle because it's full of God's glory. So here too, Moses created a space within himself, which allowed it to be full with God. However, what I'm positing over here, or at least the interpretation that, not I'm positing, sages before me, and an interpretation that I agree with, which is it's in fact that Moses was so himself and so connected to his me that God shined through that, because he was fully, and when God says like Raiti panim la panim, and Moses sees God's face in the face of the stranger or his brother, because he could fully recognize and see the godliness in that. So that would be like a complete like 180 from that other interpretation where there's like nothingness there.
Right.
And sorry, you want to say something, or?
No, I was just agreeing.
So there's a famous, we have a prayer we say in the morning called Modeh Ani. Modeh Ani, I thank God. Right? And this is also like Rabbi Cook, in a certain way, he has an interpretation of this, which is challenging Descartes' I think, therefore I am. Rather, Rabbi Cook says, I think, therefore I am. I recognize, because there could be a very sense, if you're looking at the raw power of nature, you're looking at these new pictures of the Hubble telescope, and you're like, I'm nothing. However, in reality, then you in the morning you wake up and you are thanking the creator of all things, including you. And because I'm capable to think, I could now see myself as a me. Because I could thank the creator, I could now finally really recognize myself.
Well, in that bigger purpose, it's kind of like
Yes.
you're situating yourself in. Yeah, I mean, this also reminded me, this whole part, or this one and the part after, Kshani latzmi mani, but if I am for my own self, what am I? It also reminded me of another part of the liturgy in the morning, where it says about like the the name of great valor, like who are they, right? So it's like if you are for yourself and there's nothing else that you're situated in that's like bigger than you, there is this sense of, if you look at that Hubble telescope, like this is like a grain of sand that's like nothing compared to.
There's the play of words of ani and ein, like the Kabbalistic ein,
right? Which
is like also you recognize that like you are also part of the ein of the Ein Sof, of the infinity,
right?
I'm using these terms loosely right now, so anyone that wants to be like, that's not exactly what that term means from Kabbalistic terms, you'll have to forgive me. That's not this class. Okay, so now like what you were just diving into, ukshani latzmi mani. If I'm not for, but if I am for my own self only, what am I, right? So now that we established that I need to recognize the me, and I did all that, and I thought, and I thanked God, and I'm like, I'm finally proud to be a me. What does that mean now, right? If there is nothing in front of me, if I can't see the other in front of me, then I just become an object. I'm a nothingness. If I'm only alone, what am I worth, basically? I need to have, and this is really where the idea of ezer kenegdo comes in. Lo tov liot adam levado. God sees this man by himself, can't look at himself, can't really see himself from a different perspective, a different vantage point, and try to assess himself. And then you see there's ezer kenegdo. I'm going to create a wife that is a help against him, as far as like the literal translation, which is like I'm assisting you by challenging you. And this is something that I spoke about with Sherry in the past, which is like a good wife will call out her dumbass husband because she loves him. Mm-hmm. Because in that way, she is assisting him, grounding him, helping him grow. So we're saying over here, once you recognize your stuff, you still always have to remember that you have to recognize and see the other at the same time. Also, ultimately, you have to, when you're out there and you're noticing that while there's a me because there's also these others over here. And once I'm noticing the others and I'm aware of my surroundings, ideally, you'll be able to also recognize what's above you, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. God Almighty is on top of you as well.
Yeah, maybe somebody else here can connect this better, has a better memory, but I remember actually at the conference that Pajot was making a similar point, talking about how people think about identity. And when they prescribe their own identity, it's this jumping of levels that is kind of this weird move, where if your identity is also shaped by other things. So I can't remember this well enough. So again, if there's somebody with better memory, feel free to jump in. But there is something like a similar point that Pajot was making in the conference that was very interesting.
Do you mind just trying that again?
Well, there was something about, he was talking about people trying to just define their own identity or their own unique identity from their own vantage point, and how that is like a move that is not necessarily logical. I can't remember why though. I wouldn't be able to articulate it well.
All right, if it comes to you, let us know.
Yep.
I'm just putting up a line over here. Wait, you just said the same thing for Descartes and Rev Cook? Did I? Why? I think Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. And I'm saying Rev Cook says, I think, therefore I am. I mean, I guess I'm playing around with that a little, because to think, you would first have to think and recognize yourself. But the idea is that it's not that it's that I'm thinking, it's rather that I recognize the creator. And because I recognize the creator, I could then see myself as a creation. Now, I guess you could say me saying I, and if I, while saying I, am I also doing modeh? Am I also being thankful? It would sort of depend how you defining I. If I understand correctly, you're saying the clown of Babylon is, if one is saying I and being thankful of God, then yes, then they would be saying the same thing. If I misunderstood you, please let me know. All right. Let's continue on. There's another interpretation also, which is if I'm only taking care selfishly about like my bodily self, then what will be of my ma'ani? Like what will be of, like, because here there's shani latzmi ma'ani, these double ani, there's ani atzmi and ani. The inner ani, the spiritual ani, will be left with nothing if I just, am I taking care of like, my physical wants, desires, and needs. Imlo achshav e matai. And if not now, when? So this, in theory, is pretty self-explanatory. You'd be like, of course, that makes sense. Like, the early bird gets the worm, do these things now, right? However, there's different interpretations like what this now means. So first of all, there's the now being like we have the sense of YOLO, right? You only live once, and the only time you can make change is in this world, because in the world to come, you're done. So like there's only like one life, it's happening now, and you got to take advantage of it.
Right.
Maimonides says that that now is your youth. When you're in your youth, you should take advantage, because like you're still, like we were saying earlier, you got to be malleable. You could change stuff. You could change your ways. There's still time to do that. And there's like a deeper sense, which is now being, if you're saying I'm going to do it tomorrow, you are already advancing on the now of tomorrow. There's going to be some other thing tomorrow that requires that now. But now you just stole that now because you pushed off the now from today for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then you'll never catch up. So the idea is like there's now's happening all the time. and you can't be pushing them off.
Is there any interpretation about like Hillel saying it at his point of time, where he says, if we don't do this now, or if you don't, whatever is the motivation, if you don't become a better person now, at the point of where we are today as Jews at his time, is there anything about that kind of can inform us?
Not that I know of, or that I'm remembering at least right now. But like like we were saying earlier, there's some things like that I'm saying like, oh, this is like from contextually speaking, like this is what's happening here. So you could say that happening as well. That this is also just reminding the people that this is happening right now. You need to be fully engaged. Obviously, this also relates to all the things that we're talking about, like learning and contributing and advancing. And they're all saying like these all have to be happening like now.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be very mindful, very present, so you can be able to act on all these things. And like I've mentioned many times, from waking up in the morning and doing that whole psychological thinking first and recognizing yourself, to putting on your shoes and which laces, all the way to the thought process that you have to be doing, like take advantage of the day now, carpe diem.
Mm-hmm.
And the carpe diem means be learning, and by be learning it means like be advancing, and by advancing means like be teaching. So like it's a full-time job, 24/7. There's a requirement of that, and that really also rolls in nicely into our next Mishnah. What is the Clan of Babylon telling us over here? Now he tells us, no, procrastination starts now. Exactly. Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. There. So, Shammai. So, first, let's go back and talk about who this character is. So, this is the pair of Hillel, his partner in crime. He replaces Hillel originally has like a different Zug called Menachem, I believe. Nachum or Menachem? Not Menachem, I think. But he gets replaced. We don't know a lot about what happened over there. Maybe he just picked up the banjo and wanted to do something else. We are told that about Shammai that Amat HaBinyan Beyado, that like as far as like the measurements of the house, of the structure were in his hand, like he had full control as far as like structures go. So some people see him as an architect, and some people see him as a builder, like a master builder, which also should frame, because Shammai is known as the Kabdan, someone that's very strict, someone that's very stringent. But if you're looking at it from his profession, he is living in a world where, like, listen, Hillel, you're being very loosey-goosey about a lot of things. Like, we don't need foundational walls, and we don't need waterproofing. It's going to be amazing. Like, no, there's like a code, there's regulations. If the stairs are too thin, you're going to fall. And if the
I just realized that Shammai is like, what do you call that?
Arcane.
It's like many things. But yeah, I don't know what's the term for that? Like
an appraiser.
Appraiser. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So I think this gives I think we should give a little more slack basically to Shammai, which is realizing it's not that he was just like an intense man with regards to halachic concepts, but rather he was very much like his whole mind frame was there's rules, there's regulations. You can't be playing around with these kind of things. And Hillel felt a lot more flexible. I guess I'm saying that Hillel would be like a very bad architect. So I don't know, artists could dream and do a lot of things, but yes, obviously you need to have a certain structure, and that is very important for Shammai. And we see that also clearly in his decrees as well. I'm just going to respond over here. I'll respond in a minute. Let's keep on going this right now. Okay. So what does Shammai tell us? Now that we give a little context over here, he says, Aseh Toratcha Keva, Emor me'at ve'aseh harbeh, ve'havei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'sever panim yafot. Shammai used to say, make your study of the Torah a fixed practice. Speak little, but do much, and receive all men with a pleasant countenance. Yeah. Okay. So, what do we have going on over here? Aseh Toratcha Keva. So, first is you need to make this a function and routine of your life. Keva. It needs to be constant, and that's not a hobby, right? This is like we're doing Torah on, Wednesday Torah night, bingo. Like it needs to be something that is fully built into your day to day. There are some that interpret this being v'hagita bo yomam v'layla, right? That you study this day and night, and that means like this is the focus of your life, even if this means like you're not making money. This is what you need to be doing. Rashi and other sages and interpreters see this as this is you could still be living life and working. However, this has to be happening as well as part of like the constantly happening. I would say maybe less. This was potentially made less clear, or it's less clear contextually that one could say that, being a doctor, being a good lawyer, being a good dad, all of these are living Torah lives and participating in Torah. It doesn't only mean sitting with the book open, even though we just said previously, like it also definitely means that, but it could mean living the good life, which is living a Jewish life, which also is in many sense perpetuating and manifesting the Torah and the Torah values in the world.
Yeah, I think that covers it in a bit too. Not here, but in a different mission. Yeah, but it's like you said, it's all these things feed into each other. So learning helps you to do. Like in order to do something, you need to know what you need to do, or what is good to do, or what is possible to do, and what you should do. So, like, even though maybe doing could be like the main thing that you need to do, like you still need to do the study before that so that it can inform you.
I mean, that's also in a certain sense, like we're saying, if you're not studying, then like, they're off with your head, so to speak. So here they're telling you like the safeguard that is like, you got to put this into your schedule, right? To be able to avoid that, this has to be part of the schedule. And also, some interpret that keva is like kavua, which is you need to be consistent, as in don't be giving different interpretations or different decrees, basically like every day flip-flopping. Rather, you need to be the Torah you teach and the Torah you practice needs to be consistent.
Right, okay.
Having said that, or all rabbis should, and the great ones do, take context and the personality and the individual into consideration. So you might sometimes hear that someone received from one rabbi an exemption for one thing, and from some other, and the same rabbi told someone else that he can't. But that's not because he's being flip-floppy. Rather, he's being consistent specifically for that case, and that is how he maintains his consistency, even though paradoxically it looks you have like a completely different result.
Right, theory versus application.
Exactly. So that's I'm just like making that clear over there, because someone could say like, how do people do this and that? There's obviously there's different ways to interpret that. There's some that interpret this about like, which relates to things we said earlier. Keva means not just checking the box of like, okay, I had a routine and I did it today. Rather, like in that routine, you want to be advancing more. So, for example, I could say, listen, part of my life is not my job is, let's say, architect, designer. But something that I do daily is I'm on the stock exchange, or I'm investing. Now, while I'm investing, usually that doesn't mean like, I just click things randomly and I just did my 5 minutes of investing today. You want to hear about a good deal, you make a phone call, you follow a lead, because like you want, just like in life, there's a competitive nature to that. The Torah the sages are telling you should have that in your Torah learning as well. It's don't even be content. And back to her saying that you should be contributing and advancing. So here too, there's another interpretation of that being here as well. And obviously, again, like when you have like lines like this, thinking about the ultra Orthodox in Israel, like they take these things very seriously and very literally as well. More me'at ve'aseh harbeh. Speak little but do much. So this is less about the use of your words, like chachamim hizaru b'divrechem, or like, but rather it's more of like a social thing of like, set expectations properly. Okay. One is like, set expectations and be careful with what you're saying. Second of all, be the hero. Okay. Come and say like, I'll get it done by Tuesday. And then come in on Sunday and be the rock star. Okay. Say little and do much. It not only does it, like doing the little, it creates you like in a safer place because you didn't commit too much. But secondly, if you say little and do much, you're over.
Yeah, under promise, over deliver.
Exactly. So it's they're telling you that that's very much the place you want to be in all the time.
Yep.
And that's again like really more of like a social thing that you're telling people over here. And then we have this beautiful line, which is, and receive all men with like we were saying, we have to receive them in this very, very beautiful way. And what are we trying to say over here? And this also relates to speak a little but do much, which is like, at the end of the day, you don't have to be talking and having like these pointless conversations and playing these games. Rather, say a little, do much, and treat people properly. So, first of all, kol adam, any man, right? We have kol adam nivna b'tzelem, all men were made in God's image. And here we're saying all men need to be treated in this way. What is this way? So there's interpretations, which is sever panim yafot, means you should be having this beautiful face on and smile on that you're greeting them. Okay? Even if that's not what you're feeling inside. Some say you need to truly feel that inside, and that, like, Moses' face was glowing, that will glow out. Right. And that's the sever panim yafot. Like your inwards need to match your outwards. And that would happen if you're being genuinely oriented. That should happen.
Yeah.
That the receiver should be able to feel that he's being loved and appreciated, and more than just like you're nodding your head yes, but rather he's fully being like accepted. Like he's seeing this beautiful interaction between both of you. And that's very important that you have that. That you have that feeling as well. And obviously this wraps together with in the whole context of, you just told me 300 things about me needing to learn all day, be advancing, be learning. This has to be the most, a routine. And then they're sort of taking you out of that for a second and be like, after all said and done, don't be a jerk. You got to deliver on what you promise. Because there's day-to-day life. You're going to have a kid. There's going to be things. There's going to be work. We just earlier said we opened up the whole house for people to come in and talk. Mm-hmm. I have to buy the food for that. I'm going to be interacting with those strangers that are in my house. The kol adam, the woman that I'm talking to right now, which I learned earlier that I need to be very careful when I'm talking with her. I still need to speak to her in this beautiful manner, though, because you could come and say, like, because I need to be nervous not to talk to women long. Mid-conversation, I'm going to be like, it's been 30 seconds, bye, and walk off. Like, no, you have to accept them and see them and meet them where they are. And this reminds me a little of Kala Na'a V'Chasuda. Hillel has an interpretation, which, and this is again a Shammai and Hillel sort of conversation, which is, do you lie to the bride? If she's not beautiful, can you actually say that she's Kala Na'a V'Chasuda, she's beautiful?
Where's that from?
I can't hear what you're saying right now.
Can you hear me?
No, you just disappeared.
No. Can you hear me now? I think you're muted. I don't know if anybody in the audience can either see me or Chezi.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you too.
Could you just say a few more words because it's still writing for a little for me?
I
A,
don't know.
B, C.
Seems
Yeah,
like
okay.
the clan of Babylon and Rabbi Rafi Malot can hear us.
I can hear Ben Chezi. I hear and see. Ro'im v'shomim et hakolot. Okay. Sorry. Where were we?
We were at
Kalan avechasuda.
yeah.
Something that Hillel says, like that. This is what he's saying
Okay.
inside when he's teaching, and then the question is, can you say that? And Hillel says that yes, there's a sense of that white lie over there that you're saying, but I'm connecting it over here to Havei mekabel kol adam b'sever panim yafot, that even though we said some interpretation, it's not enough that you don't really feel it inside. But the idea is that even if you don't feel it inside, it's more than just the polite hello. It's above and beyond. Sever panim yafot. That you have to create this sense where you're seeing this beautiful interaction between both of you.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense.
All right. I would say we'll stop here at 16, and I'm gonna invite people if they wish to join for a discussion about this for a few minutes. People rather wait or not. That's also fine. Hello, Rabbi Malot. Good to see you. I hope all is well, sir. We have Shammai who hates Slack should be given Slack. Ha ha ha. Exactly. I think we should understand where he's coming from. Jacob asks Menachem the Mashiach. Menachem is one of the names that we say Mashiach has. And I mentioned that Menachem was originally one of the pairs, was the pair of Hillel, but I don't think we're talking about the Mashiach. Maybe it's that, Jacob. Maybe it was Mashiach. He left, and we're still waiting for him to come back. Plevis, it's good to see you, sir. Sandy said something over here with regards to what you were saying, I think. I don't remember Pajot's comment either, but what Ben said made me think of the discussion recently talking about two sides of the debate where each is seeing in a mirror. Okay. Something about that makes me appreciate what's being discussed.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that clip. I'll try to clip it when I look at it. But I guess if I can pick up a theme from kind of what we discussed. We were talking about studying and teaching, about receiving and acting. And there seems to be something about the balance of both. So, and maybe there's obviously the thing about you can have the question, which is maybe not the right question, about like, what's more important. And I don't know if that question is really that important, but like there's the thing about the balance between the two, or what should come before, right? So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or I can keep thinking about it as well.
I think I need to see this portion of the conversation to like better.
Yeah, I mean, I think where it kind of becomes practical, and we kind of discussed the politics a little bit, but that's where it becomes practical in terms of, I think one side doesn't understand the balance. I think maybe it's a question of balance. Like when you're talking about the Orthodox, for example, and how maybe the secular portion of Israel is wanting them to be in the army, right? Then there is a part of that where they don't understand the axiom, right, that the religious people have in terms of how important studying is. But can you see? But there is something about this trade-off, or not this trade-off, but this balance of like, how much do you study, and how much do you do that versus maybe the other thing. And again, I don't know. I don't have necessarily a position here. This is just something that I'm also kind of thinking about as I myself am studying Torah more. Like, how much should I do that, or when should I do that, and how does that kind of like affect other things that I do, my day job, my conversations with my wife, doing other things, right?
So, first of all, thank you again for articulating what you were thinking, because I think that made it much clearer to me.
Yeah.
I know I mention him often, but that's because He's fantastic. Rabbi Cook mentions this geometry of the triangle, and you have land, God, man, right? And you have this triangle, which is like this is this geometry we want to be in, right? Where we have this relationship to the land, we have the relationship to God, and there's like there's obviously there's Torah involved in all that, and there's like there's the individual, the man himself. However, there are others that interpret that would agree with the geometry of the triangle. However, they'll say it needs to be able to rotate. So at times, to be able to allow the structure to remain, the focus, the peak would be on God. And it could be that at a time, like for example, when we are in exile, right, the focus is clearly not on the land, and the focus is on the individual keeping us safe, and we have on the Torah study. Now, it could be that when we come to the land, right, that is now on the focus. And it could be that there needs to be concessions made on the man / God front. For example, is that a concession politically where I'm saying I'm giving up land in Israel because I want to create peace? And maybe I need to turn that to create a new priority within that geometry to make sure it remains. Is it at some point do I need to be like, no, I need to have this access where like, no, the Jewish and halachic interpretation of the laws need to make them way inside to the policy and the political game. And that's where my focus needs to be on at this time. So like you're saying, this balance, I think it constantly needs to be in emotion. It needs to be moving and being adjusted, obviously coming from a very careful place when one does these kind of adjustments.
Right. There's sort of a kind of like this relevance realization about like what is the context that you're in. And maybe I would add to that about like the emphasis might change, but there is basics that you still, this doesn't mean that you don't do things that you should do at all times. Like study, let's say, I'm just trying to think about this practical, right? Like study an amount of Torah, or like pray every day. Like this is not something that's necessarily a given, even though you're emphasizing something else, right? So would that seem accurate to you?
More or less. I mean, we're entering the 9 days as part of the 3 weeks. We're entering now the 9 days. As we get close, remembering the destruction of the temple all those years ago. And during these days, we don't eat meat, and we don't listen to live music, and we don't celebrate. And I don't do any new construction. Like I wouldn't sign a new contract with someone during this date. Or if I did sign a contract, I wouldn't start work now. There's a difference when I'm already engaged in work from a few months ago that could continue, but I wouldn't start any new work. And there's a sense where you have to wonder, what is the expectation? Again, this is clearly happening like in a Jewish context and very personal because like, when I'm looking at this like politically, but are we to repeat our biblical sins, our biblical history, and again create the destruction of the temple by self-hate and division? And there is I was going to say like the ultra-Orthodox or Haredi people are not going to love this, but there's not many of them on this channel. So if you don't, I'm sorry, guys. But unfortunately, in this triangle right now, what represents religion, God, is the political minority that's in power, which represents a very specific version, of their interpretation of what religion is and what God is. A lot of it overlaps with modern Orthodoxy / National Zionism, which, another caveat, used to mean something else. Today it's a little more extreme. I'm using that term because that's the camp I used to be part of. Now I guess I'm just a God-fearing Jew. Either way, that is seen by the people and the land right now as, we've sort of gone hyper on this, like what this means as far as how they interpret the laws and what that means as far as people getting married in Israel and kashrus in Israel and them joining the army and them contributing to society in a, well, they'll say they're contributing while learning, which I completely value in other senses. Yeah. And the reason there's a tension there also is because like this one model of Judaism is like really, is really pushing. And it doesn't necessarily mean I need to switch it out to be like less Judaism, more people. Rather, it could be proper Judaism recognizes the people, which goes back to Haveh mekabel et kol adam b'sever panim yafot, and more me'at ve'aser beh, which is like as part of all this in this triangle of studying and doing this whole Torah move. It's all in the context of course, but I'm accepting and I'm opening up my house to people and they're invited inside and I'm doing this together. So I think we've lost a lot of that when like there isn't that sense where people are feeling that this Torah, this living Torah is not feeling very alive to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So what was that? Like I just had something, but what was the last part you said? That for a lot of people, the Torah doesn't seem. Can you repeat that? Like
that what the Torah doesn't.
The Torah doesn't seem like the main, or isn't the thing guiding them, or like it's not the.
It's not guiding who? Not guiding the Haredim, or not guiding the.
I don't know. You were referring. That was your last sentence. So I was trying to. See what you were saying because I guess I had an insight.
I'll need to go back and take a look, but I guess I was saying that what guiding them is I think they're stuck in like in I think they're stuck in the verse of Shammai Omer Aseh Toratcha Keva.
Right.
And not V'haveh mekabel et kol adam b'sever panim yafot. And now I am of course not saying that the ultra Orthodox or Haredi people are smacking people on the street and are not being nice and not being accepting and loving. That's all true, and they all do that. And there's so much love in that community. But I mean, the idea of you recognize you're part of a context, and this goes back to what was it we just said? You scroll right up. I'm just like blanking out. Shani latzmi mani, right? Right, Shani latzmi mani, right? And immediately Shani latzmi mani, right? So if I'm acting at this alone, and alone could be even like one community,
yeah.
Right? Like if that's what it's about, like it's you could see it. It's toppling over. It's going to fail. And there's even a sense over here. Again, I'm not trying to bash, but this is sort of what I'm feeling. There's even a sense over here, which is, Sandy, you're saying you're going to come in and be quiet. You could come in and not be quiet.
No, I wasn't saying be quiet. I was actually thinking I could have. I was going to say I have about a minute, but I will be quiet.
I see. So during your valuable minute, I hope your day is going well, but would you like to share what you had in mind?
Yeah. And I apologize. I'm in the car coming down to go for a walk with my son. I don't mean to get into bad grades again, but a couple of my comments, I was thinking, I was listening while I was driving here to get my son. So it was cutting in and out. But when you were talking about, near the beginning, about, when you were talking about people considering their place in the country that, that you live in, we'll just go there. Not necessarily any particular viewpoint on that, other than what intrigued my interest, which was when you choose to be, or when I choose to be somewhere, that should always beg the question, what am I investing in and what is it investing in me? And that's kind of one of the things that I was hearing when you were discussing. And I'm going to go back and listen to this whole thing again because that grabbed my attention. I participate in conversations here And I don't usually jump into this one because you're speaking in an area that I have no background or expertise. I cut out first year of marriage. I had an invitation with my husband to go to.
You were going with your husband your first year of marriage?
Well, no, I didn't. I said no. He was afraid.
We might not hear this story.
I know. What was he afraid of so much?
Yeah. Cliffhanger.
So somebody who spends a lot of time and is very visible on TV and other places was one of the two ministers that married us and asked us to please go our first year of marriage to Israel with him and his wife. And we were afraid and said no. So when you ask that, I go back to that time in my life and I think, what are the things you choose to do? Why are the reasons you choose to do them? What are the opportunities? And what do I have to give into that place? Had I chosen to go, I would bear responsibility for my time there to God for something, in my estimation. And that's part of what I heard you asking in this discussion of what you were reading at that point. That intrigues me and still scares me. And I'm still looking at challenges in life from that. But anyways, thanks. And I'm gonna, unless you need to call me on any of that, I'm gonna go and enjoy a walk and some spend time with my son. Good. See you later.
Bye. I think Sandy, lovely Sandy, was talking about when I said why am I in Israel, and what's the story that's happening over here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking about how also about Israel being shy, historical Israel being shy. As far as why I don't hear China asking do we have a right to exist yet? Israel has a schut kiyum, we have this right.
Right.
I don't think that's challenged anywhere, but we yet feel like this is a constant challenge for us. Jews, we have plenty of texts that talk about why Jews are important and why we're here and why we existed and why we were created. And so there's definitely a sense of trying to find a purpose and meaning for the Jewish question, so to speak. What are we doing over here? And I've mentioned this in the past, but come 1948, history becomes alive and the Bible becomes alive. And suddenly you have the world looking, being what on earth just happened over here? Who are these people that just came back to life? Very much. And Jacob's going to hate this. So I'll caveat with Israel's a lie. Okay, Jacob? Having said that, Ezekiel's a vision of the the bones waking up, being wrapped up in skin again and coming back, that is very much metaphorically being coming out of the ashes of the Holocaust and coming back to the land of Israel. So my general sense is with that kind of weight on your shoulder, this isn't also Sweden. At least it's what I feel like. And if you're looking for just a nice place to live, it's boiling hot over here. The traffic is horrendous. Don't. It's not the place. And if you are over here, you have to deal with this tension of the other people that are here, right? That I'm occupying. So, and if because I have a very big sense that the current protests in Israel there's a real question over there, which is the identity. Who are we? What are we? What are we doing here? Who is Israel? Mm-hmm. And I mean, the background over here, the banner, the wrestling is continuing. And we are still wrestling with that ourselves, and we really need to figure that out. But I mean, that's my general. I mean, no one's following this, so I get this is pretty niche. But you hear on the news the end of democracy in Israel. And then you have to wonder, like, but we're okay doing deals with like Arab countries and China. We're not even close to that level of like dictatorship or what's going on. And it's just the irony for me to hear pilots, heroes of Israel, come out and, say that the reform that's happening over here is like, it's going to be the destruction of Israel. That same Israel that they're talking about, that they think it's going to be destruction for, would be the dream of any one of their grandparents that was in Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, what are you talking about? Because of like this reasonable thing that like now, like, are you out of your mind that you're saying that this is like a fascist? Like, it's just crazy that like we're in this place. However, whether or not I think like this is something that like we need to move forward with, I mean, even if I think that this is like that there is a lot of merit in what the coalition wants to do, it is unfortunately tearing the country apart. And then while on, let's say, the secular concept of like, we're not interested in this religion conversation because of this triangle, because I am still very much invested in land, people, religion, I am willing to rotate that and push less on one thing so I could have the people. I could have the people still together. That's more important.
Right.
That I still have that union. So at this point, I really think they need to back down. But I think both sides really pushed themselves into a real bad corner.
Yeah. There is a sign, or there is a trend of rhetoric in the form of like this really like melodramatic performances happening throughout the world, really. And I don't know. It's interesting to think about why that has become so trendy. Part of it is, I assume, really social contagion of like the groups in Israel viewing something that happened somewhere in another country, the U.S., or something like that, right? Like how, and these patterns kind of repeating themselves.
Social media also, by the way, like
right.
We know now that the manipulation of like, the outrage media and social media and how messaging could be manipulated so quickly.
It's not even the intentionality of that. It's just that it's visible, that it's more visible, just a connectedness, just that you can see more people behaving in a certain way makes you more likely to be contaminated, right, to social contagion, if we're just taking it from a sociology perspective. That just like makes room for that to happen, right? So if social media shows more people that are talking about anorexia, which is like a famous kind of like social contagion thing, I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is more of that happening that you are aware of, then there's just more channels for that to actually infect people, right, and move throughout the society. So,
I mean, obviously I think it almost has to be this way. This goes back to like the 1948 thing I said, when like the Bible comes back to life. I think the world, and also in Israel, it's like either we need to be fantastic or like we gotta disappear. It's sort of like what we were just reading in Pirkei Avot, like Lo Yosif Yasaf. If we're not adding, if we're not contributing, then just get out of here. And I think the world is like also looking at that. There's this tension, which is be amazing, or like this is too much drama for everyone to work with. Like, so, and I think that only can happen if internally, like we decide, and like, because I very much see at a very low level Torah values manifesting in irrigation systems, in tech, in all those things. Yeah. That's one level of it. And that's just like tapping into the raw talent of the people. But I think are just like this Pirkei Avot, like why, how it like these, I think are so many values and so many concepts that are so needed And yet these aren't, and it's been in our tradition forever, how this is not built into like sort of the society of like, oh, everyone knows this and everyone does this. And you could be like, this is so old, thousands of years old. And we're like, this is like a novel. Like, I mean, 12 rules for life. That's what was so crazy about the Jordan Peterson phenomenon, which I was like, everyone's loving this guy. And this is in my text for thousands of years, what he's saying, but yet it's the most novel thing in the world. And people are drinking it up like, oh, he re-enchanted people. I want to see what we had. This is a comment based on where you were saying this seems to be a very common left-wing tactic I saw growing up in social issues. Most left-wing secular political groups act similarly. I mean, one of the big problems is it's 2023, even though it's completely illegal in Israel to block highways, and disruption itself is like part of the illegal problem, is a legal issue. It's 2023. You can't be bashing heads for thousands of people. And because of that, everything's recorded today. It's very hard for us almost to sort of hide in our past, because like Israel has just from a few years ago protests with Ethiopians and protests with ultra-Orthodox, and protests when they did when they evicted the disengagement, arresting people for days, bashing people's heads in. People were on house arrest for for the longest time, no bail. And then at the same time, you're demanding the population also watch these protests go on for months, and almost no one's arrested. No one has a case open up against them. And you wonder like, what is sort of what's going on. And on one hand, I'm very happy that we're no longer bashing people's heads. On the other hand, it's too soon, and people have social media today where you just see these videos again and again and again and again, and you have to wonder yourself like, wait, so like, am I being lied to? Am I being tricked? Is there like and it's a real big problem, because you even have this with politicians today, where I don't think a lot of our leadership recognizes how these screens and the fact that everything's recorded and seen today is still like, it doesn't affect their thinking in a certain way, where like they said something five years ago, and now they're saying the complete opposite, and they're sort of hoping that everyone's going to forget. And in a certain way, everyone's like, what are you talking about, dude? You said this last week. And on the other hand, we're very much like, well, that was 5 years ago. Today's today. We'll just roll with the punch in. And that's why, it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to lower the taxes. I'll raise the taxes. It's like, all right, like, it's all good. And there's almost like no sense of accountability anymore. I know it is. It's very, very strange times. Like you see like the Handmaid Tale of
I know of it. I haven't seen it, but yeah, I know.
So all these women that they're so this is what you have going around Israel. Like they're like all these groups that they wear the whole costume. And like, I don't know, it's just you look at it and I don't know whether to laugh or cry, because it's just so topsy-turvy, backwards world where, I don't know. I guess I also look at myself like either we need to be amazing or we got to call it quits.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I thought about it. Can sound a little controversial, but yeah, I feel like there is something, a play of identity there that, like, we call, I say we, like in terms of in the Bible, right? The Jews in Judaism, we call, there's this sense of the Ben Bechor. What is, I forgot the word for that in English.
The eldest, the
eldest,
firstborn, the firstborn,
right? So there's a responsibility. So there's a play. So it almost, it makes you feel in a certain way, whether that's kind of like top down or bottom up, in terms of like, that just gets you into a place where you feel the responsibility of, like, this is what, like, you need to be able to do something specific and in a specific way, or to a certain degree, right? And I find that really interesting. because it's unavoidable. Even if you're Jewish and you're saying there is no top down, right? God does not exist, or that relation does not exist. Your history compels you by the identity to behave in a certain way, because that's your history, is to be that firstborn.
I mean, this relates back to what I was saying about Ben Gurion, right? Definitely not top down sort of person, but I'm sending my people, my soldiers out to bring back my history, my exoskeleton of 3,000 years. It's just too much for me to just be like, well, like biblical criticism said 1, 2, 3. So I'm putting it down. Like, it's part of the identity already. And then you have to ask yourself, like, we chose Shabbat and not Sunday because of the history. We revived Hebrew because of the history. And like you just said, like, it's controversial, and it could sound very patronizing also for Jews to be like, the chosen son. So I've tried very often to say that in no way are we genetically better, or are Jewish people better. And Maimonides makes it clear that any individual can reach the level of the high priest, right? So we know that as well. And I was sent Jacob this recently, that you have in Tana de Rabbi Eliyahu. I'm translating this into English. I bear witness about the heavens and the earth, between Israel and the Gentiles, between man and woman, between manservant and slave girl, everything according to the deed he does, so the Holy Spirit rests upon him. So you're being told, man, woman, Gentile, Jew, the Spirit of God rests upon all these people. Okay. And again, there could be a Gentile individual that reaches higher heights than all Jews potentially. Okay. And individuals can do that. Jewish people, historically, I say, are the top of the arrowhead, the point of orientation. The arrow needs all its parts to fly, and we cannot fly without our Arab brothers and our Christian brothers and our Muslim and our Hindu brothers. All of them are required. However, there's always, at some point, there's a point, a top of orientation, and that point is a very robust and long tradition of relationship with the divine. And specifically, there's the Chokhmah of God and there's the Ratzon of God. And the Chokhmah of God is manifest in wisdom and knowledge in the Verveki project. That's where you're seeing the Chokhmah of God. The Ratzon of God, the will of God, is the revelation conversation. And that is our backyard. And that's the point of orientation. And that comes with the sense of responsibility. The prophet yelling at the people, begging the people, and the prophets failed. It didn't work. Coming with like these abstract ideas and just giving, selling these messages wasn't working with the people. So, Chacham Adif Menavi. The Chacham, the Talmid Chacham, the sage is preferable for the prophet, because the Chacham takes these concepts and turns them into, what shoe do you put on? I'm going to take these abstract ideas of connecting to the divine and bring it into a system that you could actually go through, that you could work out. And unfortunately, after 2,000 years of exile, we've developed an exile Torah. And the Torah of Israel, the Torah of the Messiah, can look very different than the exile Torah. And that goes back to that triangle. And it requires leaders to come and look at this kind of world we're living in, and them to be like, this yes, this no, this is how we interpret moving forward. And we don't have those leaders. We have, unfortunately, the reverse right now. So the rabbis, the rabbinate, through this reform, is also going to have the authority over the city rabbis. Second, I'm bringing in our Coptic brother over here. What's up, Andrew?
How's it going, Hezzy? Good to see you, Ben.
I hope when you said I am humble, that wasn't like a dig of me not being humble. And if I wasn't being humble, I'm sorry. I'm nothing.
No, Ben was talking earlier about how in what was the conference, Chino? Pedro was talking about how like if you say certain things like they're untrue, right? So like if you say you're humble, then it's like you saying it makes that untrue. So yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
My.
It's a good point. I think the Rambam might disagree, but
Right. The Clan of Babylon says one problem seems to be the death of the kahal. The kahal is the crowd, the people, the voice of the people. There's no unity among the people. In those days, there was no king. In Israel, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Everyone did whatever they wanted to do. And what is this? Andrew raises higher than most Jews because he's too tall.
I met Andrew and I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Andrew, how tall are you? 6'3"?
6'4".
6'4". Well, my father-in-law is 6'9", so you got nothing on him.
Oh
bro.
my gosh.
He was drafted to the NBA.
Really?
He didn't play because of the skull cap, but all my wedding pictures look like it's my bar mitzvah. I'm like hugging his waist. Like I'm 6 feet, but like he's just like a giant. He's like such a big man. My son was like, one day am I going to be like grandpa? I'm like, no, probably not. So that's not how real humans look. But I do use him as an example, actually. When my son asks me about like Goliath, I say I'm like, you have to assume back in the day, and the Israelites are probably like ranging at like 5'6", 5'7", and then you have like a Yao Ming character at like 7 something. So for all intents and purposes, it's the biggest guy in town. That's a giant. Like it doesn't mean he blocked out the sun and like he was like everywhere he was the surf, but like that is a massive person. And even just biblically speaking, like think of if you had like, and you see this like in Game of Thrones, like if you have like 7 or 8 like super skilled warriors, you could take down 100 people. A lot of these battles weren't like, like you just see like Lord of the Rings, like thousands of like the riders riding down. Like it's just like, there's good people over there. They knew what they were doing. And all right, guys, I got the wrap up sign from the missus.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I should probably head out too.
Good talk to you too. We'll keep up Monday next week. Everyone that participated, thank you so much. Much appreciated as well. We'll continue next week from Mishnah 16.
Yep.
And all are welcome. Andrew, have a fantastic day, sir.
Good to see you.
You too, Ozzy. Mm-hmm.